Ryan McKinster here, your Director of Government Affairs, and I wanted to welcome you to our first bi-monthly advocacy update. We put these updates together for you to get a little idea of what we're working on and to keep you informed of what's going on over time. As you may be aware, and you may have joined us in January, we had a pre-session webinar to give you an update what was going to happen in session. Every other month, we'll be doing a video like this to keep you up to date and let you know what's going on. And then the following month, we'll have another webinar that's a little bit more of an interactive event for you to participate in. But with that, I want to welcome you again. Thank you so much. But I'm going to hand it over to Carter Nelson, our Public Affairs Manager, to give you a little bit more information of what we're working on. Carter?
Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our brief session update and a little bit about what your advocacy team has been up to since our last update. So we'll start off with our Day on the Hill 2024. Thank you to all of those who came out and participated. We had record numbers, almost 150 members who met with 67 of our legislators. That's about half of the legislature. And yeah, we had a great turnout, a lot of representation from all parts of the state. As you can see, that's our big group photo. It was hard to kind of get everyone wrangled together because everyone was off doing meetings and different fun activities. So it was a really successful event. And to those who did participate, we're always looking for feedback of how we can make that event even better and more successful as we continue to make it more robust. And hopefully next year it'll be a 2-day event, so it feels a little less crazy with all the traveling down to Olympia. Special shout out to those who came all the way over from Eastern Washington, our emerging leaders class, and their mentors. It was great to have everyone there and a lot of first timers, and yeah, it was just an awesome event to have all those people represented. And I know it was a far drive for those who came over from Spokane, but it made it so we were able to meet with most of our legislators on the east side of the state. So we're really excited about that. And then we'll get into kind of how legislative session has been going. I wanted to quickly acknowledge some great folks who have volunteered to testify on behalf of the industry. On the screen here, we have Sherry Druckman and Katie Phelan-Costner. Those were great testimonies to kind of fight different bills, and then they went above and beyond and posted on social media. And by doing that, they engaged with their networks and more of our membership that really helped make those testimonies go even farther. So huge shout out to those of you who are engaging with all of our stuff and are willing to step up and testify on behalf of the industry. It goes a really, really far way for us. Back to you, Ryan.
Great. Well, to continue what Carter was talking about, we really appreciate the actions of Sherry and Katie and others, and those of you that we're not recognizing here, but we've seen you, whether it's on LinkedIn or Facebook. But you've already gone above and beyond, really elevating and the industry and engaging, activating, and amplifying our voice. As most of you are aware, especially over the last 3 or 4 days, you've probably seen many action alerts from me regarding HB 2114. I will give you an update on that in a little bit, but just want to point out the value of those action alerts and this member engagement. This does engage your legislative leaders, and it's important for your voice to be heard while on Capitol Hill or after session when we're talking about local issues. It's really important for your engagement. Your voice is always much more stronger than mine. I would like to point out this one posting here on the left. See, Sherry obviously posted after some concerns about rent control and our action alert. She took our action alert, not only reached out to her legislative offices through sending a con message, calling them personally. She also posted right here, which you can see, and then also Greg Cervana, who many even know, followed that on by reposting and making his own comment. I know you're used to social media. This seems like a simple thing, but it's very valuable. And to sometimes this is something that's definitely overlooked in our arena, especially the political arena. People don't understand the value of this. This is how legislators often receive information now, and it's sometimes just as impactful as making that phone call. I will point out one other thing that I'm really happy with that you stood up right away as members, and that was our action alert regarding Senate Bill 6064, which would have limited pet deposits and actually eliminated pet rents. We needed some information. Speaking with the sponsor, he wanted to know what is the average pet deposit? What's the average pet rent? We also included some information saying if there is damage, how much does that damage cost you to replace? This was instrumental. Within 2 days, we had over 250 responses that we were able to distill down, analyze, and provide to the senator. And voila, the bill disappeared. We will be working with the senator over the interim on this bill, but because of your efforts and the data you provided, in direct response to our action alert, allowed us to have a very fruitful and educational conversation with the senator that allowed us to get to this point. We knew this bill was not ready for prime time. It's now we have an opportunity working with you across the interim and the senator to create a better bill. With that, we'll also talk about a few other things. I know we've highlighted a few of our members here as helping us out with testimony, but there's been a number of members that I would call session MVPs to date. There's still time left. We'd love to name all of you. So get your email writing hands ready and your phone calls ready. We've got some work to do in the next second half of session, but here are some people we just want to point out. Sherry, Ed, Audrey, Katie, Chris, Greg, Brett, Joe, Melanie, and Katie. They are not the only ones, but they've been extremely active. I would say everybody on this list I talk to at least a couple times a week on what's going on, and they also provide immediate feedback to us on what we need to know. As you are probably aware, session moves quickly. We get questions. For example, the information about that pet rent was asked for us and we turned it around. In addition, at the end of last week, we were asked for some stories, I would say, of some difficulties you're having managing properties, whether that's damage, eviction, or something like that. We needed these for some of our allies on the House floor for the rent control bill, and you stood up. We sent in a survey out to allow you to tell us some of those stories, and right away, we had 8 stories that went into the hands of legislators to go on the floor the next day when they're on the floor Saturday. So here are some MVPs. We just wanted to give them a shout out. In addition, our lead lobbyist, Christelle Perky, I think she probably needs a new pair of shoes already halfway through session. I don't think there's any rubber left. She has been walking those floors pretty seriously for the last 3 weeks and was instrumental in pushing off the 2114 vote as long as possible, which you'll hear about in a minute. So first of all, or lastly, I would say, let's go through the legislative update and let you know what's happening. So we'll start with what we consider dead. I will caution you, nothing is ever really dead, although for practical purposes, these are. There could be something weird that happens in the last few hours of legislative session where something's brought back. But when I say it's dead, that means it's extremely, extremely unlikely, and they would have to actually go against their standardized rules to make this happen. 2003, the Rent Relief Incentive Program. That was a program that was drafted by some of our allies in the House and the Senate in the minority to allow basically direct payments to housing providers that were willing to agree to a limit on rent increases. There was a certain payback for a small increase. If you kept it even, it was even a more robust cash payout to recognize that there is some issues and some costs associated with that program. That unfortunately died and did not make it out of the House. If you're not aware, yesterday was House of Origin cutoff. So any House bill that wasn't fiscal, that's needed for the budget, had to make it out of the House by yesterday at 5. Same for the Senate. And so that's why we know where these bills are sitting or not sitting at this time. Urban growth area boundary, this was something that would allow us to create more supply. As you're aware, last year, supply was an important issue for us as well as the legislature, and we're always going to support supply whether or not it directly affects our industry. That did not make it out of the House. There's a Landlord Tenant Enforcement Act that would have made our jobs harder and more complicated. We worked with the sponsor very well, and that bill had some problems with it still, and so that did not make it out of the House. We were opposed, but I would say it was a good conversation with the sponsor, and that did not make it out of the House. SB 5961, that's rent stabilization. That was the House Senate version. That did not make it out of the House of Origin, so that stayed in the Senate, and that bill is dead. As we mentioned, pet fees and deposits, thanking the good senator that we worked on that with, chose to hold that back this year so we could work on the interim and address some of the concerns we had. A bill that we really supported that would have gotten at the issue of evictions and unlawful detainer delays, especially in King County, by Senator Mark Mullet, who's our ally, who actually was named our Legislator of the Year last year. Unfortunately, that did not make it out of the Senate, although it had support. It was watered down with some amendments, but we still strongly supported it. And we actually got support of the Housing Justice Project and some in the court system to make that change. It would have been a positive change, but unfortunately, it just ran out of time. Next up, we have one bill in limbo that I want to talk to you about. SB 6136. That's the rental property B&O tax. As many of you are aware, there's a business occupation tax in Washington State. We have a carve out for decades. We have not fallen under that tax. It is approximately a 1.5 to 1.75% tax on gross rental income. The reason I call it limbo, this bill technically did not make it out of the House of Origin by cutoff. So it should be dead. However, it could raise a lot of money. So an argument could be made, should they choose to do so, that it is a bill needed to implement the budget. If that happens, then the bill becomes alive again. We don't think that's going to happen. That is probably very slight chance. Nonetheless, this is a little bit of a gray area, so we want you to be aware of it. But right now, we think this bill is gone for this year. Now let's talk about what's alive. HB 2270 is the Department of Housing work group. This does not create a Department of Housing, but it does create a work group to consider that. We do have some serious concerns because another level of bureaucracy we think will slow down and make our jobs more difficult and more costly, what ultimately harms our residents. That bill is actually moved over to the Senate recently in the last week, and so we're waiting for that to be heard in the Senate. RET, which is a real estate excise transfer tax. It's a little different than the ones you've seen in the past. The House version is, and the Senate version did not make it out of their committees of referral. However, they are needed to implement the budget. So technically, these are alive till the last day of session. There has been no movement on them for weeks. There have been no committee hearings. However, we know these will stay alive to the last day, whether or not there is a desire to move them. So we can't give you any assurances on that. Just let you know there's a huge stakeholder group that we're participating in with the realtors, the home builders, NAIOP, BOMA, the whole gamut. We're all working on this together. And there's a very robust campaign right now, including social media advertising, actual television advertising. Some of you may have seen at the end of the Rose Bowl regarding our opposition to this bill. So keep your eyes open right now, not moving. However, we expect maybe some conversation to have when we get closer to the end of session. HB 2308, SB 6175. The House bill did not make it over. The Senate bill is still alive. It made it from the Senate to the House. It would allow a tax incentive to convert commercial buildings to residential. I know what you're saying. That's really hard to do, and we agree. We support this bill because we believe that any supply is helpful in the housing crisis we have. We do have concerns that this bill, the incentive is not really there or big enough to make it viable. However, we still come out in support of this bill. HB 2323 and SB 6212, credit reporting for rent. We and a lot of our members already offer this as a service to their residents, and we support this. We want our residents to build credit so they can buy that car, maybe move on and get their first house. We find the value in that, and we want to support our residents. However, these bills had many problems with them. There had been no research and no outreach to our industry or even the credit reporting agencies before this bill was drafted and dropped. And so we highlighted and point out many of those problems with some of our friends like Chris Duclo from Credit Hub, who actually pointed out the things that we could just not comply with how the bill was written. So we'll be working a lot during the interim, but just so you know, that's going nowhere this year. Or actually, it's still alive, excuse me, still alive, but we have not heard anything about it recently. We think it's probably going to stall, and we'll work on it during the interim. Finally, HB 2114, the elephant in the room. This is the rent stabilization bill on the House side. The House had the votes. They've had the votes most of the time during session. We did our best. This bill we thought was going to come up on Saturday. It did not. We thought it was going to come up on Monday. It did not. Finally, yesterday, it was what we call the 5 o'clock bill. It was the last bill to be heard, with the understanding that Our friends and allies in the minority and some of our moderate majority members had a long list of amendments that were going to slow this down, and any bill that followed it would probably not make it past the deadline for cutoff. Good strategy. However, once the House majority chose to make this the very last bill, there was nowhere to go with that. That strategy of stacking amendments would have done nothing to slow down the passage of this bill. Once it was picked as the 5 o'clock bill, we knew it was going to pass yesterday. Went to the floor, about an hour of debate, and it passed over to the Senate, waiting for Senate committee referrals, which we'll know in the next couple of days. Rest assured, the Senate, it has a much harder hill to climb, and we're going to do our best to make that hill as steep as possible. Partnership for Affordable Housing, which is our arm's length group that we participate in with that same stakeholder group I just mentioned about RET. We will be working on that. We already have been. There have been pass-through calls. There's been some advertising. We will continue to do that. We will be meeting this week to look forward towards our strategy in the Senate to make sure this bill does not make it out of the Senate. And if it does, it has a hard road to get back through the House. And so we've got less than 30 days to make sure this bill goes nowhere, and that's what we're going to do. And back to you, Carter.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. A lot to keep track of, but that's what we do for our members, and hopefully we'll be successful. We've been successful on a lot of things. So coming up, we do have our end of session roundup. We're still working on a date, so it's TBD, but that will likely be the middle to the end of March. We want to make sure to give Christelle a big break in between all the hard work once session's wrapped up. So please stay tuned for that. We also have a Spokane Tenant Protections virtual roundtable that we'll be hosting on April 4th. If you are interested in that, you don't have to be in Spokane, but we're hearing from folks about the impacts of those policies and kind of seeing how that's affecting the nearby jurisdictions. And so if you're interested, you are welcome to attend no matter where you're based out of. Just shoot me an email. That will be held virtually via Zoom. And as always, if anyone has any questions or wants to get more engaged, if you're hearing about this and you're looking for ways to get involved in session or in any of the advocacy things that we are up to, please reach out to us. We want our members to be engaged, and your voices are the most important thing when we're talking to legislators. So.
And just to close that out, thank you very much, Carter. We've been very busy already this year, but I will point out something, and it's kind of a follow on what Carter just said. The engagement this last year was amazing. This year, even more so. Your engagement is instrumental to our success, whether we're lobbying at the state level or the local level. You are the constituent, and they want to hear from you. And we've heard back from legislators from our day on the Hill. Your words mattered. You educated them on things that they didn't know. And for example, talking about the credit reporting bill as well as a pet fee bill, your info, your feedback, the information you provided changed those stories. Those narratives changed, and those bills are either stalled out this year for us to work on them or have a really rough road ahead until we can get them fixed. At a minimum, we should be able to get them fixed. And it's because of your voice, not mine.